She walked in. With him. My heart stopped. Everything I thought I knew shattered in an instant. She smiled at me, like nothing had changed. But I knew. The truth was there, hanging between us. And what I saw next, it changed everything. I always thought we had the perfect life. Claire and I, married for years, had built a steady routine that everyone envied. We both worked hard, we laughed together, and we were comfortable in our little world. Or at least, that's what I thought. Claire had a demanding job, and I understood that. Sometimes, she worked late or had to attend meetings after hours. I didn't think much of it. She was a driven person, and I admired that. It wasn't unusual for her to be on her phone during dinner or to check it quickly when I wasn't looking. But over time, I noticed something strange. The phone calls became more frequent. She started to smile at messages, little private moments that seemed too personal. It was subtle, like the slow fade of light at dusk. You don't notice it until it's almost gone. Her laughs, her glances at the screen, and the way she seemed more distant became impossible to ignore. But I trusted her. After all, we had been together so long. We had a solid foundation. Why would I question that now? Then came the Saturday morning. I was in the basement doing laundry when I heard her phone buzz upstairs. I hesitated. It wasn't like me to snoop. But my curiosity got the better of me. I went upstairs to find her phone lying on the couch, the screen facing up. I couldn't help myself. I glanced at the screen. There was a message. From someone I didn't recognize. See you tonight. That was all it said. My heart sank. I didn't know a David. Who was he? I didn't know what to think. I picked up the phone, feeling the weight of it in my hands. What was I supposed to do now? The text wasn't anything scandalous, but the fact that it was from someone else made my stomach churn. I stood frozen for a moment, holding her phone. 1,000 questions flooded my mind. What was really going on? I wasn't sure, but I knew this wasn't the simple, predictable life I thought I had. Things were shifting, and I didn't know where it was headed. But one thing was clear. I had to find out. And the truth? It was just the beginning. After that morning, things started to feel different. The unease I felt was subtle, but it was there, lingering in the background. I tried to ignore it, but every time Claire would laugh at something on her phone or step away to take a call, I couldn't help but wonder, who was this David? Why did he keep sending her messages? I decided to play it cool. I couldn't just confront her out of the blue with nothing solid to back it up. But that didn't stop my mind from racing. I became hyper-aware of everything she did. The way she smiled when her phone buzzed. The way she seemed to spend more time in the bathroom, locking the door behind her when she'd get a call or text. I started paying closer attention to her social media too. I figured if she was hiding something, maybe there'd be a clue there. I scrolled through her posts, and that's when I saw it. A picture of her, looking all too cozy with someone I didn't recognize. It was one of those casual group shots at a work event. She was smiling, laughing, and the man next to her had his arm around her waist. A little too familiar for someone I didn't know. The feeling in my gut deepened, and I felt a mix of confusion and anger. I tried to shake it off. It could be nothing, right? Just a friendly picture, nothing more. But the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Then, a few days later, I overheard her on the phone again. She was in the kitchen, speaking in low tones, almost whispering. I could barely make out the words, but I heard enough. "I miss you," she said. "I can't wait to see you again." That was it. The last shred of doubt evaporated. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Claire was hiding something from me. And the worst part? I didn't know how deep this went. How long had it been going on? And who was this guy, David? I needed answers, and I needed them fast. The next day, when she left for work, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit in the dark any longer. I started looking through her things, her bag, her desk at home, even the old receipts in her car. What I found wasn't exactly shocking, but it was enough. There were notes, scribbled phone numbers, names I didn't recognize. And when I pulled out a card with David's name on it, I knew. It wasn't just an innocent friendship. Claire was seeing him, and she was lying to me. I felt like I was drowning in my own thoughts. All these years, all this trust, and it felt like it meant nothing now. She'd betrayed me in a way I couldn't even comprehend. But I wasn't going to let this go. No, I was going to find out everything. And once I had the truth, I'd have to decide what to do with it. The next few days felt like I was walking through a haze, my thoughts constantly drifting back to what I had uncovered. Claire acted normal, like nothing had changed. She was still kind, affectionate, and unaware that I had begun to see through the cracks. But I couldn't shake the feeling that everything between us had shifted. I kept going through her things, the texts, the notes, things that all pointed back to David. It was all there, clear as day, yet she continued to lie. The more I found, the angrier I became, but I knew I couldn't confront her yet. I had to gather more. I needed proof. One night, I stayed up late after she went to sleep, scrolling through their messages. They were affectionate, but not in a way that screamed, just friends. There were plans to meet, little inside jokes, words that were too intimate. This wasn't casual. It was an affair, and I had no idea how long it had been going on. But what really gnawed at me was how easily she had kept this from me. How had I missed it? We'd been together for so long, and yet, in the most painful way possible, I realized how little I knew her now. Then Claire mentioned she had to attend a work event, a big one, where she'd be too busy to talk. The excuse was weak, and I'd heard it before. I decided that night I would follow her. I had to know for sure. As she left, I waited. My heart pounded. I started my car and followed her from a distance. She drove to a part of town I didn't recognize, pulling into an office complex I knew wasn't tied to her job. I parked a few blocks away, my mind racing. After what felt like forever, I saw him. David. He pulled into the lot, walking straight to the door. And there, waiting for him, was Claire. The way they smiled at each other, the way they touched, it was like no time had passed between them. It wasn't just a quick hello. This was something else entirely. I sat there, frozen. I wanted to confront her right then, but I didn't. What could I say? How could I possibly face her knowing the truth? I stayed for another hour, watching them disappear into the building together, before I finally drove back home. My heart was heavy, my mind racing with the weight of what I'd just witnessed. I had all the proof I needed. But now, I had to decide what to do next. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Claire and David together replayed in my mind over and over again. It felt like the foundation of my life had cracked, and I was standing on the edge, watching it crumble. How had I been so blind? How had I missed all the signs? I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just keep pretending everything was fine. I needed answers, and I needed them from Claire herself. I wasn't ready to confront her just yet, though. I needed to stay calm, composed, and have my facts straight. The last thing I wanted was for her to talk her way out of it. The next morning, Claire was her usual self, kissing me goodbye, asking how I was doing. It was so normal, it made everything feel even more surreal. I had to remind myself that beneath the surface, everything had changed, and I couldn't pretend anymore. That evening, when she walked through the door, I was waiting. No casual greeting, no small talk. I just looked at her, feeling the tension build in my chest. Sit down, I told her, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. She gave me a confused look, but sat down. What's going on? You're acting weird. I took a deep breath. Who is David? She froze for a second, just long enough for me to know that she wasn't surprised. What? Her voice was too calm, too practiced. Don't lie to me, I said. I know about the texts. I know about him. I know you've been seeing him. Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. Then came the deflection, the same thing I'd heard 100 times before. It's not what you think. Please, just listen to me. I'm listening, I said, feeling a calmness I hadn't expected. But you've had months to tell me the truth, Claire. Why didn't you? She sighed, her voice shaky. I didn't mean for it to happen. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I felt my anger rising, but I kept my voice controlled. You didn't mean to hurt me, but you did. You've been lying to me, hiding this from me. She stood up, trying to reach for me, but I stepped back. Don't, I said. You've made your choices. I'm sorry, she said, tears starting to fall. I never meant for any of this to happen. I shook my head, the weight of the words settling in. It doesn't matter. It's too late for apologies. The trust is gone. She looked at me, desperate. Please, don't leave me. I love you. But those words didn't mean anything anymore. The love I thought we had been ripped apart by betrayal. The trust we'd built was gone, and nothing she could say would change that. I turned to walk away, but she grabbed my arm, her voice pleading. Please, just let me explain. I pulled my arm free, my heart heavy but resolute. There's nothing left to explain. As I walked out of the room, the silence that followed felt deafening. She hadn't followed me. She hadn't tried to fix anything. And in that moment, I knew things would never be the same. The days that followed were like a blur. Claire didn't try to contact me much, and honestly, I didn't want her to. I was too caught up in my own head, wrestling with the raw emotions that were consuming me. Anger, sadness, betrayal. I felt all of them, but none of them seemed to do justice to the devastation I was experiencing. She didn't leave that night. Instead, she stayed in the guest room, her silence louder than any argument could have been. Every time I passed her door, I couldn't help but wonder if this was really it, if this was how we ended. There was no yelling, no screaming, just a quiet, suffocating tension hanging in the air. I didn't know what to do. What was the next step? Divorce? Confrontation? Or just letting it go and accepting that the life I thought I had was a lie? Claire tried to talk to me the next morning, but I couldn't bring myself to engage. She was still my wife, but she wasn't the woman I married anymore. The woman I trusted. The woman who had made a promise to me that we would face life together. And now, I was standing in a room with someone who had shattered all of that. I walked out that day without saying a word to her. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay in the house. I ended up at a bar. Alone. I needed space to think, to breathe, to be away from the woman who had just betrayed me. As the hours dragged on, I felt the weight of the decision settling in. The house, the life, the memories we had built, they didn't matter anymore. The life I'd been living was nothing but a facade. I was no longer sure who I was, who Claire was, or what we had become. I had a few drinks, each one blurring the edges of my thoughts, but I didn't feel better. I wasn't even numb. I was just lost. When I left, the sky was dark, and I felt like I was walking through fog. The confusion didn't clear up. It only deepened. Back home, things were still just as silent. Claire hadn't moved out, but the space between us felt wider than ever. I didn't know how to fix it, if it was even possible to fix. I was stuck in this strange limbo, unsure whether to salvage what was left or walk away for good. Then, Claire did something I didn't expect. She asked for a divorce. I was taken aback. I thought I'd have to be the one to make the decision. But she had already made up her mind. I didn't know if it was guilt, or if she truly believed it was for the best. But in that moment, I realized we were both broken. And maybe it was time to stop trying to glue the pieces back together. The days turned into weeks, and Claire moved out. The emptiness in the house wasn't just because of her absence. It was the feeling that something had been lost, something I couldn't get back. I was left alone with my thoughts, my broken heart, and the heavy realization that the woman I loved had betrayed me in ways I couldn't yet fully understand. The hardest part? Letting go. Of her. Of us. After Claire left, the house felt different. Quieter. The echo of her absence was in every room, and no amount of tidying up could erase it. It was like living in a shell, a reminder of the life I used to have, a life that no longer existed. I didn't hear from her much after she moved out. She left a few things behind, clothes, personal items, but I didn't touch them. I couldn't. It felt like picking up pieces of a broken puzzle, pieces I had no interest in putting back together. I went to work every day, but my mind was elsewhere. How could it not be? My thoughts kept circling back to what had happened, to what Claire had done. I kept telling myself I needed to move forward, but every time I tried to distract myself, her face, her lies, would come rushing back. I hadn't told anyone what happened. My friends, my family, they had no idea. How could I tell them that my wife had betrayed me? That I had been the last to know? So, I kept it all in. I didn't talk about it. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want anyone to tell me it would get better with time. I wanted to be left alone to process this on my own. Then came the inevitable question. What now? I wasn't ready to date again. I wasn't even sure I was ready to trust anyone. Claire had shattered that part of me. And though I knew there were plenty of people out there who would say, it's just a phase, or you'll get over it, it didn't feel that simple. So, I spent my days in a fog. Work, home, sleep, rinse and repeat. The only time I allowed myself to feel something was when the nights were the quietest. When I would lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation Claire and I had ever had, wondering where it all went wrong. One night, after a few too many drinks, I finally reached out to her. My finger hovered over her name in my phone. I wasn't sure why I even needed to contact her. I didn't expect any answers, but I wanted to know why. Why David? Why hide it for so long? Why didn't she just leave if she was unhappy? I thought about confronting her again, but what would that accomplish? I wasn't looking for closure anymore. At least, I told myself I wasn't. The message was simple. We need to talk. It was a desperate, weak attempt at regaining some semblance of control. A part of me just wanted to hear her voice again. But then, just as quickly, I realized I didn't need her to explain herself to me. What would it matter? The truth was already out there. The damage had been done. I put the phone down, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't care what happened next. The silence between us felt final. And that, in itself, was its own answer. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between Claire and me grew heavier. She didn't respond to my message, which, in hindsight, was probably for the best. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I realized I wasn't ready to hear anything from her. Not yet. The anger, the betrayal, it was still too fresh. I kept my head down at work, focused on the tasks in front of me. But no matter how hard I tried, the thoughts would slip through. They would hit me when I least expected, while I was eating lunch alone, or when I'd see a couple laughing at a coffee shop, reminding me of the life I once had. Those little moments, they made me feel like I was drowning in my own regret. There were nights when I would look at her pictures, ones we had taken on vacations or at family gatherings, and wonder where things had gone wrong. What had I missed? Was I blind to the signs? Was it my fault for not noticing sooner? But then I'd catch myself. I wasn't the one who had betrayed us. I wasn't the one who had built this secret life. Claire had made her choices, and I had to accept that. Still, it didn't stop the what-ifs. It didn't stop the feelings of failure. I wasn't perfect. I knew that. But I had always tried my best. I worked hard, I loved hard. And now, it felt like I was paying for something that wasn't even my fault. One evening, a text message from Claire broke the silence. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. A part of me wanted to respond. Part of me wanted to finally ask her everything I had been holding in, to get answers. But another part of me knew it wasn't going to change anything. She had already made her choice. She had already betrayed me. I set the phone down. No reply. I wasn't sure if it was pride or exhaustion that kept me from reaching out. Maybe a bit of both. But I knew, deep down, I wasn't ready to revisit that pain, not yet. I needed space to breathe, to heal, to figure out who I was without her. But I wasn't sure I'd ever really heal. Could I? I had no answers, no direction. I just had this gnawing feeling that I was stuck in this endless loop, caught between the past, what had happened, and the future, which seemed too uncertain to even think about. The weight of regret was overwhelming. I could feel it creeping into every part of my life, every conversation, every decision. It wasn't just about Claire. It was about me too, about what I had allowed myself to become. I knew, eventually, I'd have to face her again. But when? And what would that look like? The questions kept piling up, and I had no answers. Time passed, but nothing seemed to change. The silence between Claire and me grew heavier, suffocating. She hadn't reached out, and I didn't expect her to. Still, her presence lingered in the house, in the quiet spaces between my thoughts. The betrayal was always there, even if it wasn't spoken. Then, one morning, I got a text from her. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. What was there to say? But I couldn't stop myself from wanting answers, so I replied, "Okay." That evening, we met at a small cafe we used to love. I arrived first and found a quiet corner, hoping the silence would help me gather my thoughts. A few minutes later, she walked in, looking fragile. Her eyes were red, and her expression was full of regret. But it wasn't the same Claire I knew, it was someone else. Someone I didn't recognize. She sat down slowly, hands trembling. I didn't speak, not at first. What was there to say? We had already said everything, hadn't we? "I've been selfish," she began, her voice barely audible. "I know that. I've hurt you. But I need you to understand it wasn't about you. It was me. I felt unseen. I let myself get lost in something I shouldn't have. And I should have come to you, but I didn't. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. And David, was he just a distraction, or was he something more?" Her face flushed. It wasn't like that at first. But then, I don't know. He made me feel noticed. I should have never let it get that far. I should have talked to you. "You say it wasn't about me, but it was about me, Claire," I said, my voice tightening. "You destroyed everything we built. For what?" She wiped her eyes, her voice breaking. "I don't know why I did it. I thought if I kept it a secret, I could fix it before you found out. But it got out of hand, and I ruined everything." Her words hit me, but they didn't land the way I wanted them to. They didn't heal the wound. The trust was gone, and no apology could fix that. "I don't know what to do with this," I said. "But I can't keep pretending. I don't want to fix something that's already broken. Claire's shoulders slumped, her tears falling freely now. I understand. We sat there for a while, neither of us saying anything. In that silence, I realized that this was the last time I'd hear her voice. The last time I'd see her like this. And as I walked out of that cafe, the truth settled in. There was no going back. It was the end. The weeks following my conversation with Claire felt like a slow-motion crash. The aftermath was harder than I expected. I had hoped that knowing the truth would bring some kind of relief, but instead, I felt more lost than ever. I threw myself into work, into anything that would keep my mind occupied. But the emptiness lingered. It was as if I were walking through life in a fog, pretending things were normal when they clearly weren't. Claire's betrayal, once out in the open, had shattered something deep inside me. There were moments when I found myself wondering if I had ever truly been happy. I had spent so many years believing everything was fine, that we were fine. But now, the life we'd built seemed like a hollow memory. One evening, I decided to clear my head and took a long walk through the park. The sky was fading to twilight, the world around me serene and peaceful. But as I walked, I saw a couple laughing together, holding hands, carefree. A pang of jealousy twisted in my gut. How could they be so happy? So innocent? I had once been that person, believing in love and loyalty. But now it felt like all of that had been stripped away from me. The more I tried to push away the feelings, the stronger they became. Later that night, I got a message from Claire. My heart skipped when I saw her name, but I didn't open it immediately. I wasn't sure what more she could say to me. After everything, could her words even make a difference? Finally, I opened the message. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "I've been thinking about everything, and I know I can't fix what I've done. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I was lost, and I don't know how to make it right. But I miss you. I miss us." I sat there, staring at the screen. Her words hit me hard, like a gut punch. I wanted to respond, to say something that would make everything feel less broken. But I couldn't. The love I once had for her was still there, but it wasn't enough to undo the damage. I set my phone down, knowing that replying would only keep me stuck. She was no longer the person I had married, and I had to accept that. I couldn't go back. There was no turning back from this. The days that followed Claire's message were some of the hardest of my life. I had expected to feel a sense of clarity after everything had come to light, but all I felt was more confusion. Each day I woke up, faced with the cold reality that my life had been upended. I felt like I was losing myself in a sea of questions. Could I forgive her? Could we ever find our way back? Or had everything truly fallen apart beyond repair? I had always prided myself on being a practical person, a problem solver. But this was beyond fixing. Claire's betrayal had cut deeper than I was willing to admit, and no amount of apologies could change what had happened. I couldn't live in a constant state of distrust, wondering when the next lie would surface. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything that came after. The silence, the distance, the realization that the woman I had trusted above all others had chosen someone else, someone who had become more important to her than the promises we had made. And yet, part of me still missed her. I missed the version of Claire I had loved so deeply. I missed the way we used to talk, the way we laughed together. I missed the life we had built, even though it was clear now that it had been a fragile illusion. I spent hours thinking, alone with my thoughts, trying to figure out what was best. I had to face facts. We couldn't go back to what we were, no matter how badly I wanted to. It was then that I made the decision. I needed to move on. For my own peace. For my own future. I couldn't keep waiting for a resolution that might never come. I had to let go, not just of Claire, but of the life I had envisioned. I had to make space for something new, even if I didn't know what that looked like yet. The hardest part was accepting that I couldn't fix this. I couldn't fix us. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. I didn't respond to her message. I didn't call her. I just took a deep breath and began to let go. The hardest part wasn't confronting her, or even facing the betrayal. It was acknowledging that it was over. After making the decision to move on, everything felt strange. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I spent a lot of time reflecting, unsure what to do next. I had expected to feel a rush of emotions, grief, relief, anger, but it was more like I was numb, floating through each day, not sure of where I was going. I threw myself into work. It wasn't out of passion, but necessity. The routine of deadlines and meetings was a welcome distraction. I kept busy, kept my head down, and it was easier than facing the emptiness that lingered at home. It wasn't just work. I started reconnecting with friends, those I'd neglected over the years while I focused on Claire and our life together. The conversations felt a bit off, a little awkward, but I needed them. I needed to feel like I wasn't alone in this, even if they couldn't fully understand. One night, a few weeks after everything had settled, I ran into Lisa, an old acquaintance I hadn't seen in years. We'd shared some friendly conversations in the past, but life had pulled us in different directions. We caught up over drinks, reminiscing about work, friends, and mutual experiences. It felt easy, simple. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel weighed down by the past. We talked for hours, laughed, and I realized how much I had missed feeling connected to someone, anyone. As we said goodbye, I found myself thinking that maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I could still move forward. I didn't expect anything to come of it. I wasn't ready to dive into a relationship, but it was a step, a small spark of hope that maybe there was more out there than the pain I had been drowning in. When I got home that night, I didn't think about Claire. I didn't replay old memories or wonder what could have been. For the first time in months, I thought about the future, what it might look like without the weight of betrayal on my shoulders. The road ahead wasn't clear, but I was no longer afraid to walk it. The days that followed felt like stepping into the unknown. The numbness I'd been carrying slowly began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of possibility. I wasn't sure exactly where I was heading, but I was starting to believe that it wasn't all downhill from here. There was something on the horizon, something I couldn't quite see yet, but it was enough to keep me moving forward. I kept in touch with Lisa, exchanging casual messages here and there. Nothing serious, just light conversations to keep the connection alive, to remind myself that I wasn't completely shut off from the world. She had become a reminder that it was possible to move beyond the past, to reconnect with life and people in a way that didn't feel so heavy. At work, I started to enjoy things again. I found myself more engaged in projects, more focused in meetings. I wasn't just going through the motions anymore. I was actively participating, reclaiming a part of myself that I had lost in the chaos of the past few months. It wasn't that I had forgotten everything. Far from it. But I realized that I couldn't let my life be defined by one mistake, one heartbreak. I also began to take care of myself in ways I hadn't before. I started running again, something I'd loved doing years ago, but had given up on when life with Claire became more consuming. Running was a strange kind of therapy. It cleared my head and gave me space to think, or sometimes not think at all. It was just me and the road, the rhythm of my footsteps grounding me in the present. One evening, after a long run, I was sitting on a bench, catching my breath, when I got a message from Claire. I hesitated before reading it, not sure what to expect. It had been weeks since we last spoke, and part of me wasn't sure if I was ready for this. "I hope you're doing okay," she wrote. "I know things are messy, and I don't expect us to go back to how we were. But I want you to know I'm thinking of you. I miss you. I hope you find happiness." It was a simple message, but it hit me harder than I expected. I thought about responding, about telling her that I wasn't sure how to move on from everything, but I didn't. Instead, I set my phone down and looked out at the horizon. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. I didn't need to respond to her. I didn't need closure, not from her anyway. I had already made peace with my own choices. The hardest part was realizing that sometimes, the most healing thing you can do is let go. That night, I thought about the future again. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean or simple, but it was mine. And that was enough for now. Life started to feel a little lighter after that night. The weight of the past wasn't gone, but it was no longer holding me down. Each day felt like a small victory, a step towards something new, something better. I realized that healing wasn't a linear path, that some days would still be harder than others, but that didn't mean I couldn't keep moving forward. I continued running, something that had become my new routine. It wasn't just exercise. It was a way to clear my mind and reset. I started exploring new hobbies, things I hadn't had the time or energy for before. I took up painting, something I'd always been curious about but had pushed aside for years. There was something cathartic about putting my thoughts onto a canvas, about creating something with no expectations, just pure expression. Lisa and I had started meeting up for coffee once a week. It wasn't anything serious, but it was nice to have someone to talk to. Someone who wasn't caught up in my past with Claire. We talked about everything. Life, work, our shared love for hiking. and I found myself laughing again, genuinely laughing, something that had felt foreign for so long. One afternoon, we went for a hike up a trail I'd never explored before. The sun was warm, the sky clear, and as we reached the top, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment, both from the hike and from where I was in my life. I had come so far in such a short amount of time, and though I hadn't figured everything out, I was proud of what I had already achieved. On the way down, Lisa and I talked about our pasts, about what we'd learned from relationships, about what we hoped for the future. It was a conversation that felt easy, comfortable. And it hit me. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't afraid of moving forward, of opening myself up again. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, even if it meant facing the unknown. Later that week, I took another step. I went through the old photo albums I had kept tucked away, pictures of Claire and me, of happier times. I sat down with them, feeling a mix of nostalgia and sadness. But this time, I didn't cry. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt grateful. Grateful for the good memories, for the lessons learned, and for the strength I'd found within myself to move on. I put the albums away with a sense of finality. I didn't need to dwell on the past anymore. It was part of me, but it didn't define me. I was starting to realize that life could still be beautiful, even after the mess. The future was unwritten, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could write my own story. As the weeks went by, I found myself adjusting to life in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. Sure, there were still moments when Claire would pop into my thoughts, but they were fewer, less intense. I had started to build a new routine, one that didn't revolve around the wreckage of my past. Running had become my ritual. It wasn't just exercise, it was a release. A time for my mind to reset. I also rediscovered painting, a hobby I'd let go of for years. There was something cathartic about putting my feelings on a canvas, channeling the anger, the sadness, and the fleeting moments of joy. It became a way to let go without saying a word. I stopped checking social media, stopped wondering what Claire was doing. It didn't matter anymore. For the first time, I realized I didn't need answers. I was healing, and that was enough. I had been waiting for closure, but now I understood. Closure wasn't something she could give me. It was something I had to take for myself. One evening, sitting on my balcony as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. The weight I'd been carrying for so long was slowly lifting. I had come to terms with everything. I was okay. In the weeks since Claire left, I hadn't heard from her. She hadn't tried to reach out, and I hadn't reached out to her. The truth was, I didn't need her to apologize or fix anything. I had done that for myself. I realized, then, that it wasn't about erasing the past, but finding a way to move forward. That night, I deleted her contact from my phone. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. I wasn't erasing the good memories, but I was letting go of the hope that we could somehow return to what we once were. Then, I got a message from Lisa. We'd been texting casually, but this time, it felt different. She suggested we take a weekend trip together, just to get away to a nearby town. Hiking, good food, a change of scenery. Nothing serious, just an adventure. I hesitated for a moment, but then I realized I was ready. Not to rush into anything, but to open myself up to life again. I said yes. Maybe it was a step towards something new. Or maybe it was just a chance to enjoy life without the weight of the past. Packing my bag felt lighter than I expected. I wasn't running away from anything. I was running toward the future, whatever it might bring. The weekend trip with Lisa turned out to be everything I didn't know I needed. The small town we visited was charming, full of winding streets, quiet cafes, and trails that led up to breathtaking views. It wasn't just a getaway, it was a reset. We spent the days hiking, talking about everything and nothing. Lisa was easy to talk to, and with every passing moment, I felt more at ease with myself. We laughed about silly things, shared stories from the past, and somehow, in the midst of it all, I felt lighter. The more time I spent in her company, the more I realized that there were still parts of me I had been neglecting. At night, we sat by the fire at the little cabin we rented. The stars were clearer than I had ever seen them, and I found myself appreciating the small, beautiful moments I had forgotten. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't haunted by the past. I wasn't worried about what would happen next. I was simply present in the here and now. I didn't know where this new chapter was taking me, but I knew I was ready for whatever came next. I had stopped looking backward, stopped wondering about the what-ifs. I had let go of the idea of forcing things back to how they were. What had happened with Claire was part of my story, but it didn't define me. I was more than that pain. As I sat there, listening to Lisa talk about her own journey, I realized that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about accepting it and moving forward. And that's what I was doing. I wasn't running from anything. I was simply embracing what life had to offer now, in this moment. When we returned home, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. I wasn't the same person I was when Claire and I first met, but maybe that was a good thing. I was learning to be someone new, someone stronger, someone who had faced heartache and come out the other side, not unscathed, but whole in a different way. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was ready for it. The next chapter was mine to write, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see what happened next.